Hey, this is Coach Brian Wright. This is Coach's Corner. It is Monday, June 22nd, 2026. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about Ilia Topuria and this 9-fight win streak that just got disrupted by Justin Gaethje. Topuria went on a massive tour of duty, 9 victories in a row, culminating in this title fight on the White House card, and he gets dismantled. He's just broken by Justin Gaethje. And now we say, okay, where do you go from here? Is the greatness come back, or has he been broken and is never going to be the same? I don't know. That's the question that's hanging out there. When you look at the longest winning streak, you've got Anderson Silva at 16. You've got Islam tied with Anderson Silva at 16. You have Kamaru Usman at 15. You have Merab at 14. Then you're looking at George St-Pierre, 13 fights in a row. John Jones, 13. Demetrius Johnson, 13. Khabib Nurmagomedov, 13. Max Holloway, 13. 13's the big number. Those are huge numbers. 9 is a huge number. Having the ability to string victories like that in the UFC is a monumental task. The lights, the crowd, the criticism, the attention, the money, all of it, it all adds up to challenges that not everybody is prepared for. These are unique individuals that are able to step in there time and time again and find success. You know, success is not just some unique thing that happens. It's a physical, technical, psychological melding of things that just happens to work for that person. And then when that gets disruptive, now we find out, is it a technical, a physical, or a mental thing? 9 out of 10 times, it comes down to the mental side of it. You've seen a lot of people walking around with a sense of invincibility. For me, it's a little bit older of a name for some of the newer fans, but Mirko Cro Cop is a guy that was basically the destroyer of worlds. He was a superstar in K1, becomes a superstar and a champion in the Pride Fighting Championships, gets brought over to the UFC, has a very weird first fight where they gave him a guy who pretty much didn't want to fight. He chased the guy down until he knocked him out. And then he comes in and he fights Gabriel Gonzaga. Gabriel Gonzaga is a very big man. He is a primarily jiu-jitsu fighter with some striking, but it's not Mirko Cro Cop level striking. So Mirko Cro Cop comes out and we're like, okay, if he gets taken down, that's going to be a problem. And then Gonzaga throws it all on around and knocks out Cro Cop with a head kick. And then Cro Cop's career never finds the same success he had when he was in K1 and in Pride. There's no long winning streak here. Now it's win a couple, lose one, win a couple, lose one, until he decides to move on. So the sense of invincibility got broken, and then he becomes vulnerable. And it's something like, if you look at an interesting deal with world records in general, let's say, take the Olympics. When a world record gets broken, one that's been standing for a long time, it tends to get broken a couple times. And it's because the belief comes into it. Someone breaks that record. Now we have a blueprint to follow the training and the protocols that got that record broken, and we start to also believe that it can be broken. So long-standing things like win streaks, they start to feel inevitable. These wins are just going to keep coming, and your opponents are like, they see the wins piling up, and they're coming in, and they want to believe that they can beat you, but in the back of their head, they're going, man, this guy's really good. He's got this pile of bodies behind him. And it's really hard to fully believe. But now the division has kind of seen the blueprint. They've seen weakness. They've seen a guy that they said you can't survive his punches. They saw someone survive. They saw someone come back. They saw someone break him down and beat him. So now Topuria is a man that is not invincible any longer to anybody in the division. He's also not invincible in his own mind. And so now he has to go back to the drawing board. He has to heal up. He's going to have to deconstruct himself and then rebuild himself to be able to take on the division effectively. George St-Pierre fought Matt Serra, and that was an inevitable. George St-Pierre probably had a party after weigh-ins like, hey, here comes another win. And then Matt Serra said no, and he finished him. Then George St-Pierre had to go back, and he got a sports psychiatrist or psychologist, and he figured out what was going on. He figured out where his mind was in the sport. He figured out a lot of things about himself, comes back, beats Matt Serra, and then becomes the legendary George St-Pierre that we all remember him to be. So adversity is not the end. A loss like this against Gaethje is not the end if you do the work. And that's going to be the unanswered question here. Is he going to go back and analyze what went wrong? Was it just he got hit and he couldn't see? That's never the case. You got hit and you couldn't see, and then you responded in a particular way. And when I'm looking at that fight, I saw an arrogance in the way that Topuria came out. He came at Gaethje and he said, I'm going to finish you in a round. And he came out, did not have respect for the size difference. He didn't have respect for the proven power of Justin Gaethje. He didn't have respect for all the people that came before him that said, hey, Justin Gaethje's the hardest hitter I've ever faced. And he came out there and he thought he was going to be special and he was going to be different. And Justin Gaethje just proved to him that he's human. And now Topuria has to deal with being human. And now he has to be a human fighter. And the biggest question is, can he be human? Or did he need to put a cape on and be Superman all the time? And this is a thing that a lot of fighters face in their careers. There's a lot of guys that get on streaks and the streaks get broken, or they get a lot of hype around them and they believe it, and then the sense of invincibility is gone. We see a lot of guys that come from the regional scene that get into the UFC and they've got decent win streaks. We're not talking 20 fights here, but we're talking about guys can be on winning streaks where they were undefeated as amateurs and then they become decent pros and they can win 5 or 6 fights, get the contender series, knock somebody out. They're coming into the UFC feeling like they have momentum, but they've never been at that level before. They've never had to face competition that has experienced at that level before. And then they get flatlined or they just get beat or just things don't work the way it always has. And now it's the time. You want to see a second contract in the UFC? You've got to go back and you got to figure out, okay, how do I survive here? I thrived regional. That's one thing. New animal. I've got to figure this out. This happens at every level of sport. It happens on the way in. It happens mid-career. It happens late. This happens when Father Time starts knocking on the door and it starts questioning you and is saying, do you want to keep going? So that's the thing about fighting that makes it so beautiful and makes it so dramatic, and why Justin Gaethje beating Ilia Topuria there's just so much interest on both sides of that fight for me. Because again, I'm talking about Topuria and I'm saying, okay, how is he going to recover? How is he going to come back? What's his career going to look like after this? Is he going to be a 500 fighter now because he doesn't have a sense of invincibility? Or is he going to get pissed off? Is he going to figure out what his problems are? And is he going to sharpen the blade and come back and be even that much more of a hammer than he already was? These are all questions we have to see if he's willing to answer. But then you've got Justin Gaethje, who's, win a couple, lose one, win a couple, lose one. But the thing about championship fights, you don't need a long win streak to be the champ. You just have to get the opportunity to fight the champ, and then you got to beat him. So Justin Gaethje may not have a 16-fight win streak, but he has an ability to perform under pressure when those lights are on, not allow the hype to get in the way, and he has the ability to make people that feel invincible look very, very human. He has the ability to look very human himself, and I think that's the superpower of Justin Gaethje, is that he understands how human we all are. He understands that he may break, and he also understands that you may break too. Everybody's breakable in this sport. There's nobody that's indestructible, and as long as there's time on the clock, you still have an opportunity to win. And that's what makes Justin Gaethje so difficult, because he may be losing, but he's still trying to tear your head off. And he may have lost a couple fights, but he's still going to come in there looking to win. He has that understanding of his own weakness, and he sees the weakness in other people. And then he makes them see their own weakness. And then how they decide to respond is what the outcome of the fight tends to be determined by. And that's the genius of Justin Gaethje. And that's what makes fighting so special. And for me, again, Topuria is a phenomenal fighter. The guy has all the skills. But for me, from the outside looking in, I see the trap he fell into was that he was starting to believe, I'm not going to say necessarily the hype, but he started to believe that he was invincible. He started to believe that his hands were all he needed. He started to believe that this narrow focus was too much for anybody to deal with. So now he's got to go back and he's got to sharpen up all the skills, and he's got to make sure he's got the mentality behind it. And the willingness to keep going when you've been damaged as bad as he was really does say something about the grit and the determination and the pride that the man has. I just want to see, after sitting there with his eyes shut and his ribs aching and he doesn't have the belt around his waist anymore, does he get fired up and is he motivated to get back in the gym? Or is the fear of being exposed as human sitting in the back of his head and making him reluctant to return? That's the hardest part, and that's the weight. And that's where you have to let go of the critics, and you got to let go of the fans, and you've got to let go of any opinions but your own. And you've really got to look inside yourself and you say, do I fight because I love fighting? Or do I fight because I like the things that come from it? Because if you don't love fighting, the things are never going to be enough. And fighting is not about winning. Fighting is about having the ability to take the damage and give the damage. It has the ability to overcome, not just do well when things are going well. And that's the hardest part. The hardest part is seeing all this adversity that's going to be standing in front of you and saying, okay, I'm willing to do it. Fighters are special people. They choose to do something that's extremely hard. And any critics about fighting, calling it violent and all these things, you're overlooking the special nature of the people that do it. You're overlooking the fact that this is a monumentally difficult thing to face. You're facing potentially being maimed for the rest of your days. Brain damage, joint damage, spines and necks never being the same, hands not working the same. As a dad, when I was fighting, I started to look at it and I'm looking at going, I want to be able to hold up my kids at the end of this. As a coach and as a fighter, I had to modify some of the things I did because I understood the damage that I was taking, and my life started to change. I cared about my wife and my kids more than anything, and that's why, the way I held pads, the way I sparred, the way I trained, my willingness to accept fights anymore, it all had to get modified because of where I was in the sport and what I wanted to achieve in my life. And we all have that we have to look at. So I look at Ilia and I say, you can come back and be better than you were, because if you can really embrace your humanity and find a little bit more humility than you had, you'll find out that that sense of invincibility is not found in this idea that you're unbreakable. The greatness is found in accepting that you will be broken at some point, but you train so that you can keep going when this happens. And that's where the real invincibility comes from. So when you're not just training right, but you're forging yourself to accept the inevitability of a Justin Gaethje type of situation and saying you're not training to beat everyone when it's going well, but you're training to be the best person in the world on your worst day. That's the key. So Topuria potentially has seen his worst day, and he didn't stop. Someone stopped the fight for him. That does say something. Easily, he could have sat on that stool and just said no more. But he still wanted to get up, and I believe it was his brother who stopped it. So between the brother, the doctor, and the referee, the fight got stopped. But Topuria wanted to keep going, and that's admirable. So I am looking forward to what's next. I want to see what the next chapter is. And this is what keeps bringing me back to fight sports. This is what keeps me showing up every day in the gym, what keeps me analyzing the sport, which keeps me a fan, is that the just raw humanity of it all, where we can see people rise and fall, when we can see these stories being told. So when things are tough, I can find inspiration in the tough things other people have endured. And when I want to quit, I can see people that have. I can see moments where the fights have been stopped, and you see just how horrible it is for the person on the losing side. I don't want to feel that way. I want to keep going. And if it's not going to work out, make the referee, make the doctor, make the rules stop me. But I want to keep going. And a lot of that just comes from being around the sport and being a part of the sport and being a fighter myself and being a coach and seeing how the wins and losses add up for all these people. So, yeah, we can look at the X's and O's, and we can look at the wins and the losses, and we can look at how entertaining the shows are. But sometimes we have to look at the men and women that do this, and we've got to see the real humanity in it and not just look at the violence of it or the glorious nature of it. But we have to look at the humanity of it, and we have to be inspired by the losses and the comebacks, and we have to be inspired by the real adversity that's overcome. So, yeah, when we talk about the business of combat sports, in so many ways, this is the business. Without people willing to face themselves by getting locked into these cages and stepping into these rings, we don't have anything to talk about, and these organizations don't have anything to profit off of. So yes, these few people that choose to do this, they're the ones that keep it going. And yes, they are special. And yeah, they do deserve to have appropriate pay and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Justin Gaethje, Ilia Topuria, one for the ages, one of the best fights of my lifetime on one of the best sporting events I've ever seen. Phenomenal situation, straight through. Sets up for another chapter. Does Topuria and Gaethje, do they get a rematch? I don't know if Gaethje will still be around for then, but I think the fight at this point is Topuria versus Topuria, and how he successfully executes that will decide what his next fight is going to look like. So when he gets better, we're going to find out how he answers that question. So this is Brian Wright. I'm the coach. This is Coach's Corner. Thanks again for watching. Please like, share, help me spread the word. If you have an opinion about my opinion, let me know about it. Let's keep the conversation going. Have a good one. Peace.